Hello, everyone. This is Adam Meister, the Bitcoin Meister, the Disrupt Meister. Welcome to This Week in Bitcoin. Today is July the 17th, 2020. Strong hand, long-term thinking. Bitcoin is the next Bitcoin. One Bitcoin equals one Bitcoin. I'm offended by selling conviction. And today we had some conviction before this show started. We had issues and we kept on plowing ahead there. That's what you got to do, guys. 2024 halving. Think long-term. All right, we got some guys that have been here for the long-term that will be here for the long-term. All right, we got John in up in Canada. We got Brandon in Tennessee, and of course Federico Tenga is in Italy. All right, very good. So let us start out with a quote from Brandon on Twitter, because dude, you've been rocking it in Twitter here. You said to the Twitter hack was really a political statement, people. I vehemently disagree. They started with Binance and then CZ and worked their way through a bunch of crypto company accounts first. They did it for Bitcoins. Otherwise, they wouldn't have gone mainstream first. They would have gone mainstream first. So please tell us your insights on this, this was the big news of the Bitcoin week. Also talk about the remote aspect of it. That was very good observation.
Yeah. So, the more that we've been digging into this, the more we kind of understand. And originally, it turns out it was Angelo BTC. I think that was the first account that he actually, hacked into. And so Angelo BTC, I mean, you want to talk about a niche kind of guy to be following and want to have access to their account. He's a whale trader guy. He's not like, if you're trying to do some big, brilliant maneuver in Twitter, you're not going to start with Angelo BTC, because like as soon as you kind of make yourself known that there's something fishy going on, you're on the clock. You got to execute, get all of the kind of aspects of what you're trying to do done, and then get out before you get caught. That didn't happen. Really, you saw him start, or you saw these people start with Binance and Angelo and CZ, and I help run Bitcoin Magazine Twitter, and so we're watching all this happen while sitting on a 600,000+ person Twitter account that's blue check verified as well, and we're like, holy cow, what are we doing? And so as this information is growing, people are saying, I think Barry Silbert came out and said, we're 2FA'd with everything. We're totally secure. We don't know how this is happening. So immediately, we're in here, I'm logging everyone out of their sessions. I'm removing all the API keys, that are sharing read-write access on our Twitter, all this kind of stuff. I mean, we're scrambling. And, the hack just keeps evolving and evolving. And finally, they go through all these crypto accounts. And the next step is they hit Elon Musk. And so at that point, you're like, okay, if this was a planned thing, that you want to, really maximize the amount of destruction or Bitcoin you're getting or something, you would start with Elon. Like, you would start with these. If you can get into Elon's account, that's the first guy you hit. So clearly, this doesn't scream premeditated to me. This doesn't scream like there was some sort of plan that they were working through. This says, I got keys and I didn't know what the heck I was going to do with them. And so I just started doing whatever I could, the first thing that came to mind. And so that's kind of the way that I kind of operated looking at this. And there hasn't been a lot of evidence to suggest that this was anything more than some guy shilling a Bitcoin address. I mean, they had the website, but this website was super low tech. It was basically a landing page. And then they had a Bitcoin address that they tried to get people to send to. And yeah, I mean, that's kind of the quick thoughts there.
No, and so it might have been sort of spur of the moment. Like, he noticed, well, talk about how everyone's remote now at Twitter and how that was a attack vector.
Yeah, so my gut, and again, this is speculation on my end, but my gut says that this attack was not going to be possible back in March, right? Like, I'm sure to have this God mode access to Twitter, you were going to have to be, firewalled, probably locally in the building of, Twitter's headquarters. Like, they've got to have some geo, security around their backdoor access to everything, right? And so I would bet, in March, I remember Jack Dorsey coming out and saying, like, we're letting everyone go remote. We're closing down the office. We're a remote first company. And so when you do that, you've got to be, cutting some ropes and letting people have kind of access from home. I mean, it just has to happen, right, in order to let people work from home. And so I would bet, like, I'm picturing, in my head, speculating that there was some conversation of, well, if we let everyone work from home, that could open up a security vulnerability of some guy, being able to hack in. And someone else was like, yeah, but what are the odds that that happens, right? But if this was possible before, it would have happened before, right? It would have happened way before this, because the amount of damage, the amount of money you can make off of hacking into Twitter like this is so great that it wouldn't have taken, what, 13 years of Twitter being like a mainstream thing for someone to figure out how to do this hack. It would have been way quicker. So I think that it just makes sense that the virus that was spreading kind of led to the ability to kind of execute this attack.
Yes, dudes, I love the take. I hadn't heard anyone mention the remote aspect, that they're all remote now. And yeah, I remember when Jack Dorsey was bragging, oh, we're going to be remote for now. Well, it opened up a weakness, perhaps. So best guest in the freaking space here on the show. I bring you guys with creative ideas like that. We shall see. Pound that like button. They're all linked to below. Okay, so John, you've seen what's happened. Is this good for Bitcoin? Was this situation a good advertisement for Bitcoin? What are your thoughts? Oh, unmute.
You're saying, is it good for Bitcoin?
Yeah, you're good. You're good. Yeah, you're good. You're fine. Sorry, there was a delay. There was a delay of some sort. You're cool.
Okay.
You're cool.
I think it's good. Like I'm. Of course, we're all curious. How was it premeditated? How much time did they have? Like, of course, everyone thinks they could have done a million other things that would have been worse for Bitcoin, better for Bitcoin, more leverage, more political, whatever, got more money. Because I think if he was really just trying to scoop up some Bitcoin, I mean, even if he just catered it to the person he was hacking, like, hey, I'm giving away some Boring Company blowtorches, send me $100 in Bitcoin, like that would have netted him more than just the obvious copy and paste scam that he sent to everybody. And short term, like, will it bring some regulatory eyes to Bitcoin? Possibly, as people investigate this thing. But for me, like, everything is bullish for Bitcoin, and that's just my, my default position. I don't, it's always waxing and waning, right? Like, Bitcoin is implicated in this scam or this drug thing, and then people poo-poo it for a while in the media, and it doesn't care about any of that stuff. So I pretty much see everything through the lens of being bullish for Bitcoin. In the short term, might it get some negative press? Possibly, but does it matter? Probably not.
Okay, Federico, what do you think of this situation? Coming from your Italian perspective, is it good for Bitcoin?
Yeah, of course. I think for sure, it forced people to pay attention to Bitcoin. People that from the mainstream public that maybe never really care much about Bitcoin, so they put them right in front of their face. And then also, I think I would have been disappointed if the hacker had used anything that wasn't Bitcoin. So the fact that he had this massive superpower, and the first thing he came with was trying to steal some Bitcoin. First, they show how much Bitcoin is valuable, and two, show how good of a tool for payment he actually is. And what I found really funny, I was looking about some of the addresses that he posted on some of those mainstream accounts, and there was a guy sending transaction to these addresses. Was encoding a message in many different change addresses, and the messages it encoded was something like, oh, I can track all your transaction on Bitcoin. Why didn't you use Monero? Monero is much better for this. So there was this Monero shield, crying about the fact that he was using Bitcoin instead of Monero. So it really showed that even for a use case where privacy is clearly really important, the hacker prefer to use Bitcoin compared to some privacy coin because, maybe Bitcoin may have less privacy on the protocol, and even that is debatable, but for sure is much more liquid. So if he gets a lot of money in Bitcoin, you can sort of either hold them for the long term or trying to find ways to cash them out. While with like a small market capitalization, altcoin is much more difficult. So it really showed the value of Bitcoin, how it is superior to alternative when people actually have a use case that they care about it.
Yes, they did not ask for Monero. It would have looked very strange if there was all of a sudden a mass asking for Monero. I will say this about the Monero people that hid that message in the outputs. It was creative. I mean, they did get attention for Monero. Okay, the Monero shill or whatever you want to call them. Because I talked about it on my show yesterday, and quite a few people. I know you tweeted about it too, Federico. So it was the Monero people did. They got their little piece of the publicity by doing that. But I mean, the major point is like, for all the people out there that think, my altcoin is the next Bitcoin, no, it's like everybody defaults to use Bitcoin in whatever they do, be it something nefarious like this or something good. I do want to return to Brandon. Do you think, because I didn't ask you this question, was this good for Bitcoin? What's your take?
So, I gotta have a slightly different take. I think that I'm not going to say it was bad for Bitcoin. I think ultimately it doesn't matter for Bitcoin one way or the other. I will say I don't think it's good for Bitcoin. I mean, all you have to look at is Joe Biden's kind of response today, where he's like, I would never ask you for Bitcoin kind of thing. Well, if you were really trying to dig deep into Bitcoin and understand what it's doing and try and support the development of it in the U.S., you would be like, yeah, actually, I would ask you for Bitcoin, but I do it, through my address of my campaign account and that kind of thing. But that kind of knee-jerk reaction is what I don't like to see. Because, we went live on Bitcoin 2021 Twitter, actually, because we couldn't get Bitcoin Magazine. But we kind of talked about these knee-jerk reactions. And one thing that I think about a lot is the fact that we don't have yet the penetration into mainstream conversation for the actual Bitcoiner perspective. And so mainstream gets to take this story and run with it however they choose. And there's no journalistic integrity that will require them to get some sort of perspective from the Bitcoin space. And so because of that, the conversation and the narrative gets to be, hackers use Bitcoin in order to scam people out of their money. And however they want to portray it is however it's going to be portrayed. And I'll agree that ultimately, most people who get in the Bitcoin space first hear about Bitcoin because of a scam. Maybe it was the malware, maybe it was the ransomware attacks, back a couple of years ago, whatever it was. But ultimately, that is still something that Bitcoin has to battle against. And so I wouldn't say that that's a good thing for Bitcoin, but also ultimately, I don't think it really matters. Bitcoin will succeed regardless of however people first encounter it. So that's kind of my take.
All right, that's an interesting take on it. Again, people did hear about it. I lean toward John there. Any news is good news, but we got to bring up this Biden quote. I'm glad you brought it up. I'm going to read it to everyone. I don't have Bitcoin, and I'll never ask you to send me any. But if you want to chip in to help make Donald Trump a one-term president, you can do that here. So he's definitely, the vibe he's giving off there is, I don't have I don't want to be involved with something that was sketchy, that somebody hijacked my whoever wrote this for him, someone hijacked all our accounts and mentioned Bitcoin. So it's, I'll never ask you to send me any, and I don't have any. And people did respond to that. Bitcoiners in that thread responded like, how can you be running for to be the most powerful person on earth and not have any Bitcoin? Which is, to me, I think it's shameful that you're bragging that you don't have Bitcoin. But again, he's a 70-something-year-old dude too, and he didn't really write it, and who knows? So, John, I think you had something else to say. I heard something in the background.
Yeah, well, I just wanted to touch on the final point. I think I accept the point that people will run this story and it'll have a negative slant and they won't consult Bitcoiners and all that kind of stuff. But if you look back at maybe each of our own journeys, or any time you have one belief and then you kind of do a 180 and turn around to seeing things differently, you know, I think that you almost kind of spring load the interest. So what I'm saying is, like, if people are led more and more to believe that Bitcoin is a scam, it's for drugs, it's for criminals, the contrast between that impression and the impression that they get when they actually kind of learn the truth of it, I think spring loads a lot of that energy that they'll bring to it when they come in. So, like, I get that it may have a like negative slant in the media, but once you realize that you've been lied to, or that you misunderstood something, or that something that you previously thought was correct or truthful is not, I find, at least in my own intellectual journey, it puts fuel on the fire when I actually realize that, you know, I had the wrong impression, or I was lied to. I go further into the truth faster because of the kind of dramatic contrast. And so, you know, looking at through the lens of everything is bullish for Bitcoin, all that negative press is just kind of, you know, generating all this kinetic energy for the people that, once they get it, will really not only be interested in Bitcoin, but will suspect the media and the government and all these people who put out these false narratives.
Well, I guess you are a thinking man, and you dig deep into this stuff. Some people will just have some initial emotional reaction, and
For sure.
and that's the majority. And we're going to talk about some of these impulsive emotional reactions when it comes to economics in a second. Just before we move on, do any of you guys have anything more to say? Because we're going to leave the Twitter hack goodbye. We're going to say goodbye to it here. Anyone else have any thoughts on it?
Well, yeah, if I can just say something else, is the thing is that maybe there are many people that heard about Bitcoin in 2017 when there was the massive hype, and then it kind of went under the radar. So they were like, oh yeah, Bitcoin, there was massive hype, and then it disappeared. Nothing happened out of it. So they may think that Bitcoin, I'm not saying it's dead, but almost. Now they hear again about Bitcoin, so it comes back into the radar. So they say, okay, so Bitcoin is still around, and more people will know that it is an option out there. Maybe it's not for them because, oh yeah, it's full of shady people, Bitcoin is used for scam, but it's still an option on the table that they are aware of. And the important thing for Bitcoin, I think, is that people that need Bitcoin know that Bitcoin exists. We don't need everybody to use Bitcoin, but we just need those that actually need Bitcoin to be aware of the option. And anything like that, even like very bad publicity, like being associated to scams or even worse, is still a way to keep it on the radar, to keep awareness up.
Well, yeah, I agree. Keeping on the radar is good, but there are people, when it gets on the radar and they are enemies, they've made themselves enemies of Bitcoin for some reason. I don't know what's wrong with some of these people. We're going to read a quote. When it gets on the radar for whatever reason, and if you can somehow spin it negatively, they take it to a whole new level. And Peter Schiff, I don't want to put the dude on a pedestal. Like, he's such an important player in economics or in finance, but something has gone totally whack in his mind. He's a very stubborn dude. Okay, we can agree on that. But this latest one, it looks like all verified Twitter accounts have been hacked by someone running a Bitcoin scam. For once, not being verified has its advantages. And that's good. I wonder if this is a harbinger of Bitcoin itself being hacked. Better to play it safe and just buy gold. I mean, it's like the lowest common denominator. He's a smart man. He knows he's appealing to people who don't think. There's a story that involves hack and Bitcoin. So he says, well, maybe Bitcoin's going to be hacked because Twitter was hacked. Any thoughts on that, Brad? Any thoughts on that? Anyone?
So, I've got a quick thought on that. Fraud has been rampant in the history of human beings. And, you can look back to snake oil salesmen back in, the 1900s. And, people aren't still buying snake oil. Well, they are, but, it's a different flavor of snake oil. So there's always going to be these scams. Wire fraud was a huge thing. Nigerian princes wanted your money. This is not anything new. And there's been plenty of scams perpetuated with gold, too. So, I think that, ultimately Peter is just, he has a product he's selling, which is gold. and he's got to manufacture competitive advantages of gold over Bitcoin. And so this is just him going through his marketing stunts. And, Bitcoin's not going to get hacked. So, I'll be happy to have a clown nose on my face if it ever does, but it's just not going to happen. So I think the take is cold, but it's just Peter being Peter.
Just Peter well, he took full advantage of this one. That one, I thought he took it to another level on that. Okay. I don't want to give him too much attention. Anybody else have Peter Schiff thoughts there? It happened this week.
I was just going to say, Peter is always playing to his incentives, right? He sells gold, and Bitcoin, in some people's minds, is a competitor to gold. You weigh the merits of both before you make an investment, and so he's playing to his incentives, and you wouldn't expect anything less. I think with Peter, you see the case that is present in other people in the space that I'm sure we're all familiar with, where I think he's got a very big ego, and he thinks that his voice can hold back the tide, means anything regarding Bitcoin. I mean, not only is he kind of a Luddite, and you see with the issue with his his blockchain wallet password, and then recently, his issues on Rogan and stuff, like, he's not tech savvy. So for him to be commenting on Bitcoin at all is kind of farcical. But I just think he's I agree. He's not a stupid guy. He's insightful. The stuff he says on economics and politics, there's much that I agree with. But I think he's got such a big ego that he thinks that his being critical of Bitcoin means or has any influence whatsoever. And, I don't believe that it does. So it's just the ramblings of another person with Bitcoin derangement syndrome. And it's kind of fun to watch and tease sometimes.
I mentioned on a past show that he was going to be on Rogan soon, and then I forgot about it. So he was on 2 days ago, wasn't he? Did he? Yeah. He was on. Did he say anything about Bitcoin?
I couldn't listen to it all because he apparently had a mic in his ear and only a camera what he was looking at. So he wasn't looking at a screen to see Joe. And apparently, I didn't even know this was a thing, but his mic or his earbuds, his audio only worked when he wasn't speaking. So when Joe tried to stop him when he was like mid-roll, apparently his audio doesn't work for that. So it was this really like Peter kept talking over Joe, interrupting, not stopping. So I only lasted like, I don't know, 20 minutes, and I couldn't stay in. But I don't believe he mentioned Bitcoin.
I thought he was going to use it to. Yeah, I mean, it coincided, I guess, with the Twitter with the Twitter hack. It was all around that time. So if he did say anything about Bitcoin, nobody has mentioned it yet. I'm not going to listen to all 3 hours. It sounds like he had a setup like we have here. Pound that like button. No fancy sets and graphics here. You never know what you're going to get. Okay, so if Peter could be, maybe Peter will show up here. Okay, now speaking about Peter, I'll give him this. All these years, he definitely has been talking about inflation. He understands scarcity. I mean, he's a gold guy. So let's talk about a celebrity who does not understand scarcity. And this is an insight into the way I think a lot of normal so-called normies out there and impulsive people think. This is from Alyssa Milano, who has many, many followers. Many people love her. She says, F this. We are losing this battle. She's talking about the virus. And all these, I can't say the word because I don't curse, all these jerks are talking about our kids going back to school. Nope. We need a national shutdown now. Print cash. Give people UBI until we get this pandemic under control. So, and she's not a voice in the wilderness here. There are plenty of people who think it's a great idea to shut down the country, the world, so there's no productivity, but just hand out a bunch of fiat, and that will, that'll be fine. That'll be great. Who knows what will the future bring? Who knows? But that mentality, that's not treating money as something that's scarce. It is the complete opposite. That's definitely something Peter Schiff would not tweet out there. But I want your take, Federico. I guess we'll start with you. This, I don't even know if you know who Alyssa Milano is. That's not the point. But just this mentality that printing money is going to save the world here. It seems
But I
like
think-
more and more people are moving away from I think in our bubble we think, oh, everyone's waking up to Bitcoin now. But look at this. This is the complete opposite. Federico, take it away.
Well, I think that this provides two insights. One, that there are many people out there that are not willing to take personal responsibility. So there is this risk vector out there. There is the virus, and they are not willing to deal with the risk themselves and assess to find the right trade-off between security and productivity. But they want the government to do that for them. And this already say a lot about how much people are unwilling to take personal responsibility, which is something related to Bitcoin as well. And also, like with the idea of handling UBI to everyone, they also say that people are not willing to even take collective responsibility because you just like close your eyes on the fact that you're not gonna, if you don't create wealth, that you cannot create wealth out of thin air. You have to do something to feed the people. So they just hope that printing money is kind of the solution, which is completely crazy. But I think this is, in a way, if this mentality is really widespread and the Fed start printing money, it's exactly the scenario Bitcoin was created for. So it can kind of accelerate the adoption of Bitcoin. And me, as a non-American, I prefer the disruption of the financial infrastructure starting from another country. So if you start in the US, it's better than if you start in Italy or in Europe. It's kind of selfish. So, but if the Fed starts printing a lot because there is political will to do that, because a lot of people actually want this, I think it can. I mean, it's obviously going to be very bad for the economy and for the world economy because it's a global economy. But it will finally validate the use case of Bitcoin instead of having to wait maybe for decades to see Bitcoin in the scenario it was created for.
All right, Brandon, Alyssa Milano, inflationary monetary policy. Do you agree? What do you think about this?
So I'm going to take it from a very different viewpoint. And here's kind of my thought process is right now we're printing the money anyway. We're doing QE. We're having these crazy stimulus bills, and we're putting the money directly in the pockets of the corporations, the banks, and all the kind of the system that we all really right? I don't think necessarily on its face that doing that money printing in the pockets of the everyday person is that bad of a strategy. Don't get me wrong. I think the entire thing in general is a terrible strategy and will ultimately lead to the destruction of the dollar, inflation, the destruction of our economy, ultimately will lead to Bitcoin. And so from that perspective, it's like, if this thing's going to accelerate Bitcoin adoption, then, I'm kind of for it as well. So from the two standpoints I look at it, it's like, one, let's change the paradigm a little bit so that people are being benefited by all this money printing instead of just rampant wealth inequality that we have today. And two, if this speeds up the adoption of Bitcoin and ultimately Bitcoin succeeds because of these crazy destructive inflationary policies, then I'm kind of like I'll stand back and I'll let this happen because ultimately I know it's a train wreck that ultimately ends in Bitcoin success. So that's my take. I don't know who the person is that tweeted it.
Alyssa Milano was famous once. She knew Tony Danza. All these Italian names. We've got Federico here. What's going on? All right, okay. So John, on the other hand, we have people like Alyssa talking about the inflationary monetary policy, and it seems like the masses they don't want to think about. I guess this is what they learn in school. I don't know. The money printer saves the world. Robert Breedlove had an article that you and I were talking about, and I talked about on a past show. And in the article, a well-written article, he was saying that the world is waking up to central banks, and that such policies will fail. People will call them out, and that everyone will wake up to Bitcoin, or many people will wake up to Bitcoin. So in that light, I guess discuss Milano's tweet, and you can combine it into the Breedlove stuff.
Well, first of all, I love how you said she was famous. She knew Tony Danza. That's the qualifier for famous. But look, I think her mentality and her thinking and her perspective on this is reflective of what it is for many people. And not that, you know, most people understand how the monetary system works. I think they just think that the government is this kind of omnipotent, all-powerful God. And they say, you know, they've heard a lot of big numbers, and you know, this people getting bailed out, Wall Street gets this money. And people are just starting to sense, in conjunction with a generation of people that relied so heavily on the state, that they're saying, well, like, yes, government's got unlimited money, so why don't they fix these problems like that? And they don't really take it to its logical conclusion of what the implications of doing so would be. So, you know, to Brandon's point, yes, she's an accelerationist, and on the one hand, that's good. On the other hand, you know, I think a lot of the conversation today is coalescing around what a transition looks like, and, you know, amongst us, I mean, not amongst the mainstream. Yeah. And, you know, first, if it is going to be a smooth transition, we need to get to a place where at least the people that are at the helm of the old one kind of recognize that things are going off the rails, so that they can start the discussion about, well, what would a new system look like? And obviously, we seem very far away from that. So unfortunately, I think these sort of accelerationist attitudes will persist, and that'll mean that the problem, the inevitable kind of collapse, will be a lot worse. And you know, I think we all agree that it's probably going to be ugly, and we're still all trying to figure out how to maneuver that. But to the point about Breedlove's article, first of all,
wait, could I jump in real?
Yes.
On that point.
Yeah.
So I agree that this accelerationist kind of standpoint is dangerous from the perspective that it will ultimately lead to a much larger, you know, extreme collapse. I will counter argue it and say that if we don't have this accelerationist kind of perspective, then the transition takes that much longer. There's more wealth inequality that is caused by the system. People on the bottom, you know, 99% suffer that much more under this kind of inflationary regime. Maybe it takes 50 years for that to happen. And you know, at no point will governments be incentivized to transition to Bitcoin unless there is an absolute and complete collapse. So from that perspective, I almost think that the accelerationist standpoint may be, you know, kind of the classic increase the damage to end the war early and you know, save lives. So, you know, I just wanted to throw that perspective out there.
Yeah, I got no issue with that. I think that's well put.
All right, you're right. You're going to mention the Breedlove thing.
Yeah. So, first of all, massive fan of Breedlove. Have been loving his writing. Think he's just a phenomenal contribution to the space. But what we were discussing before we started was, you know, I think, and I can't remember the degree to which he tied everything up at the end of his article, saying that people will recognize this kind of economic truth and they will, you know, they'll be motivated for change. I tend to think that the change is going to come as a result of economic truth asserting itself, not necessarily by the majority of people making these decisions, because I just don't think that's indicative throughout history. But what we were talking about is two things. One, people's idea of what freedom is, and also people's, I think in our opinion, maybe fallacious perspective that they have freedom right now. Of course, it's on a spectrum, and we could argue that all day, but I think a lot of people think what they have is freedom, and as a result, they're not that motivated to seek whatever lies beyond, whatever more freedom means. But the other thing that I think many of us sometimes fail to consider is, look how bad things are now. You know, look for how long, you know, governments and central banks have been skimming off the top. Look how long productivity has been withheld from people. Look how much their savings have been eroded. Their time has been stolen, et cetera, et cetera. And the vast majority of people have absolutely no issue, and most of them have no awareness of that. And so things, to Brandon's point that he just made, things can persist for a very long time, even if, you know, from a more clear perspective on things, and I would assert that, you know, the perspective of the Bitcoiners is clearest among them, things are very bad, and there's injustices, and, you know, there's a lot of unfairness, and the way things operate could be so much better, and this could liberate people more and could be more economic productivity, et cetera, et cetera. Most people don't see or care about that. And so I think things could persist a long time. Like we all think in the light of the last few months where all this money's been printed and, all this monetary inflation has happened. I mean, I just looked at fiat market cap today, and over the last year, US dollar M0, I believe, money supply is up 23.5%. So people aren't looking, people look at the CPI and say, oh, 1%, 2%, maybe a little bit more inflation. And like, okay, I'm generally okay with that. But nobody's looking at monetary inflation. Like nobody's even motivated to dig a little deeper on that. So, maybe we go through another 10 years where the monetary inflation is 50% a year. Like at what point does the system collapse? Because I think we're just going to see a lot of manifestations of systemic collapse, but manifesting in the various forms of unrest that we've been seeing. And it could be the case that as long as it doesn't affect you too badly, as if you hold financial assets, et cetera, then you're going to think everything's fine. And you'll just look out your window and think, boy, it's a crazy world out there. And all these things are popping off. And, a lot of people may not connect all the dots to realize why this is happening and what can be done to turn it around or to improve things. So, I think to your point, Adam, and again, I don't know how much Breedlove was suggesting that people are really going to wake up to this, but I think the slow trickle of people waking up to this, and you got to love that NGU tech of Bitcoin, and hopefully we get a bit more of that, because that at least kind of brings people in to start, investigating this thing that they're engaging in, and that leads them on a trail to understanding these things more. But it's a slow trickle. I mean, look at the Bitcoin community is awesome, but on a relative basis, it's tiny still today. And so, I think it's going to be a matter of necessity at some point, rather than people, willingly choosing to opt out and engage in a different system. And that could take a while if the system is able to prop itself up for longer.
Do you think that Fed coins will give the United States Federal Reserve the ability to prop itself up for like an incredibly long amount of time? I've been saying for a while, because so many people in the space are against central banks, and of course and that they're just doomed to fail. But they've got some tricks up their sleeves, and they can learn from cryptocurrency. And I think people do like convenience, especially in this day when people are clamoring for UBI checks. Well, if FedCoin markets itself as like, hey, you'll just get it in your account in 2 seconds because it's FedCoin now. Do you really see one day the United, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but the United States becoming or a major country out there becoming totally Bitcoin, that being the system?
I do see that in the future, but I'll accept if it's a distant future, because I agree that I think we'll see like a bifurcation. There'll be those people that stay in the old system and they are subject to the abuses inherent in it. And there'll be those people that extricate themselves from it, whether they do so financially and physically, or just financially, or what have you. But I think there'll be a kind of slow moving away from the other, whereas in 10 years we might look back and say, or might look across the pond or over in a certain area of the world and be like, those people are still under the very oppressive regime. And then you've got a small but growing group over here that have carved out, whether it's just in cyberspace, whether it's in the real world, financially, et cetera, a more free system that they're choosing to engage in and operate in. But I think these innovations like FedCoin, I also think the extreme liquidity of more and more assets is really going to maybe slow down the necessity for sound money as well. For example, like if I can just own a portion of a share of Tesla and I can liquidate it into USD and pay for a coffee like within seconds, then the necessity for sound money is diminished, because I can go from an income, or I can go from an appreciating asset to a medium of exchange very, very quickly, only for the purpose of exchanging or purchasing things. So all that kind of stuff will mix together, I think, to kind of conceal the necessity, importance, and value of sound money in the short term. But I still think that, like ourselves, there will be people trickling in that start to see it, And as long as we have our expectations in check, as long as we're not expecting this to happen in the next 5-10 years for this to be this global revolution of liberation, then I think we ourselves will uniquely benefit. And, you know, hopefully other people see that benefit and they'll be attracted by it. But a lot of people will remain blind to it. And I think we get two different systems, one of extreme oppression and abuse and one of liberation and freedom.
I got to say, pound that like button for that convenience of liquidity mention there. That will keep people in the people will want to keep things the way they are if they could just turn their Tesla into a coffee really quick. And that's technology. And hey, I love living in a world where technology does allow that. Of course, if everybody doesn't work and you just get checks from the government, then we don't have technological progress. But anyway, Federico, what's your take on will Italy one day become Bitcoin dependent? I mean, will that be the main monetary device over there? Or how long do you see the euro and central banks lasting in your part of the world?
Well, I don't think Italy will be one of the first countries to adopt Bitcoin. I think we can look at country that the first country that will adopt Bitcoin. I think it will be those that are in trouble with the US, basically. So country like Iran or African countries, stuff like that. Because right now we live in a world where there is on the monetary side, the US dollar is basically the absolute leader, monopolist. But from a geopolitical point of view, we are moving towards a multipolar war. So it's not going to be just to have the US as the only superpower, but we are seeing a new superpowers emerging. And at that point, they may not be willing to keep using the US dollar, which is a direct benefit for the US economy. And at the point, which one is going to be the currency for international trade, for international settlements? You know, if nobody's willing to compromise for the other, they may be willing to compromise for something that is neutral, that is not controlled by anyone. And if Bitcoin can become big enough to be an option for those kind of countries, I think at that point it can accelerate very quickly as soon as governments start to use it for international payment. And we already kind of see it in sorry.
No,
okay.
Keep going.
We already kind of see it on a small scale with Iran starting mining bitcoins and North Korea trying to use Bitcoin in a way because they cannot use US dollars, so they're forced to use Bitcoin. So I think those are the countries from which it will start the adoption on a government level, and from that maybe we will have Russia and China, etc., and at the very end, Europe and the US.
You know, you said in passing there, you said that some countries just might give up on the dollar. And what do you think about the phenomenon, though, that we're going through now, these stable coins? That it seems to me, I think the stable coin will make the dollar even more powerful. More people will value their wealth in dollars because of these stable coins that some people think are very convenient and people have given use cases for. And do you have any thoughts on that? Stable coins popping up the dollar.
Yeah, think about stablecoin. Yeah, sure, they're very convenient, but the thing is, why they are convenient? Because they can avoid the regulation and the compliance that traditional payment processor and financial institution have to deal with. So why USDT is better than PayPal? Simply because USDT can do legal arbitrage and avoid a lot of compliance and be more convenient. But this is not going to last forever. I mean, if USDT becomes big enough, then the regulator it will be worth the effort for the regulator to start cracking down on it and have more control on the transaction happening on USDT. And at that point, if a USDT or any other stable coin becomes a KYC coin, it is no different from PayPal or Facebook coin or whatever centralized payment system you use. And yeah, I mean, it's good to have that as an option until it lasts, but the very problem that they cannot avoid forever the problem of all the limitation that compliance brings. And so at that point, maybe when stablecoin won't be as as good as they are today because of increasing regulatory pressure. At that point, maybe all of those new stablecoin users will have to move to Bitcoin because it will be the only option left.
All right, Brandon. We just talked about a lot here since the last time you spoke. Do you have anything to say about the future of central banks and everything we've been talking about? Brandon?
Yeah. Can you guys hear me? Because I'm getting a little bit of feedback from you guys. Am I coming?
Yeah, it's been muffled a couple times, but you're all right.
Can you guys hear me?
It's good. It's fine. You could turn off your picture. That might help, but it's fine.
Okay. So I'll try to talk slow, and then maybe my mic will kind of come back. But so basically, I see a lot of things kind of hit on. I'm trying to keep it really short, but basically, I see us as having defined our economy narrowly by a couple. This is kind of what I'm hitting on, but it's like CPI and our stock market, and kind of we figured out a way to basically measure the economy's success by these very sticky metrics, and we hacked our economy in order to make those metrics go up. Well, it still remains broken for everyone else. And by doing so, it's mainstream narrative we're trying to communicate, which is everything's fine, right? People have an inherent ability to understand things are not fine. Things are not fair. There is unfairness in them, but the mainstream hasn't been able to give them the tools, the ability to kind of communicate the unfairness. And so in doing so, I see this, these protests really coming from our inflationary system, our broken QE, all this kind of it's all the same thing in my opinion.
All right.
And so when we talk about, I don't know.
It got a little muffled there at the end. So why are we getting this? We're getting some weird feedback there. What's up with the? Everyone's got their earphones on, don't they? I don't know what's up with that. All right. Well, I was going to ask Brandon about the IRS, but I'll ask. All right. It's something's up with the mic over there. Play around. We'll go to John real quick here. There's a story that's it's a two-part story here, and CoinDesk says the IRS enlists Coinbase in its latest crypto tracing deal, and of course earlier. Coinbase sold software to the Secret Service that monitors public blockchain information. Your take on this, John?
I mean, what do you say at this point about Coinbase? I think we should just kind of expect worse practices from them at this point, like both technologically and how they interface and engage with policymakers, regulators, policing bodies. They're clearly just in it for the money, and like that's why they list a ton of shitcoins. That's why they incentivize people to buy and learn about shitcoins. I mean, you go to the front page on their landing page on their website, and they have offers to learn about Omise Go for $150 or some bullshit, some stuff. But it's so and then. Whatever makes their ability to generate income easier, less friction, working with regulators, acquiescing to anything that the government or these three-letter organizations want, I think they're going to do. I mean, they just simply seem to completely lack or have lost any sense of principle of why they're operating in this space. And I just think they could be selling sandwiches. Like all they care about is maximizing revenue. And none of the ethos that I think many of us feel, and much of the ethos are in this space. I don't think they have any of those. So I'm not surprised.
You mentioned that they're maximizing revenue, and that's what a company does. That's looking at IPO. This was last week's news, but I'll ask you about it anyway. What do you think about the IPO that might happen by the end of the year? I think that's good for the space. It brings attention. But what's your take?
Yeah, I mean, Sure, like I'm open to that argument, but again, I just think it's not surprising. They've got a bunch of Silicon Valley investors. They've been growing for a while. Like this is the path they're supposed to take according to, you know, the model and perspectives of everyone that's involved in that company, right? You gain traction, you grow, you IPO so everyone can get paid off. Again, you know, it doesn't necessarily make them bad, that particular thing. And, you know, a crypto company IPOing, maybe it brings more attention to stuff, but like I don't care about Coinbase. They're not principled at all, and I don't like how they operate and what they stand for. So, you know, whatever. Right. They're gonna just try to make as much money as possible, fair play, but I'd rather just ignore them.
All right, Brandon, let's see if how's your mic now? Your thoughts on,
can you hear me?
Yeah, it's good. Your thoughts on Coinbase dealing with the IRS and the Secret Service?
Yeah, so I'm bummed I didn't get to go through my spiel, but we'll ignore now to do it some other time. But Coinbase, you know, my gut take is I get the argument that anyone can do this. It's public data, it's public information. If we don't do it, someone else will do it. I get that argument. Okay, where I'm coming from is, you know, we don't know all of the different contracts they have, and we don't know what kind of data sharing there is in the government. So if they're, in the one hand, giving the IRS or FinCEN or whatever all of their KYC AML stuff, and then the Secret Service getting all of their you know, public blockchain data analytics, how easy is it for them to then tie together that information and basically have some regulatory body that is literally tracking every single financial transaction you do, piece by piece? I mean, that's a terrifying thing. And, you know, it's always an argument with privacy of like, well, I don't need privacy because I'm not doing anything illegal. But the point is that if you don't fight for privacy when it's first being kind of taken away from you, then you will never have it when you need it. And ultimately, privacy protects the minority. It's, you know, it's not here for you when you're all fine and dandy and, you know, going along with the crowds. But as soon as you disagree, as soon as you put your neck out there and you become a different person, you become a target, that's when you need privacy. And so it's really to protect everyone. And I think that when you look at Coinbase, you know, just giving this data to the Secret Service, like I don't even know what the Secret Service does from a standpoint of analyzing, you know, Bitcoin transactions. That seems weird that the Secret Service of all places would be getting it. But the point is that these kind of tools ultimately erode away at your personal rights, you know, human basic rights. And so that's what really bugs me is that this, I deserve to have financial security and financial privacy. And when Coinbase just sells that away for $180,000, you know, that really irks me.
Yeah, they weren't that, the deals weren't big money deals. Now, you said you didn't get to do your spiel. You can do your spiel now because you came in loud and clear. So take advantage.
Okay. So the point that I was trying to make is that, you know, when you define the economy by these narrow terms like CPI, like the stock market, right? And you're kind of basically, everyone's view of how the economy is working is based on those two terms, right? Is there inflation and how's the stock market doing? Well, very quickly, you can start iterating the economy to basically find a way to make those two numbers go up, or those two, well, inflation stay steady and then the stock market go up, while completely messing up the fundamental workings of the economy. And no one has like the vocabulary to talk about how broken the system is, because they were all taught, like all these economics you know, professionals and experts were all taught to kind of think in these very narrow terms of what a successful economy looks like. So that's like point one. Point two is that the economy is not working. You know, Andrew Yang kind of had a good point a couple of months back, and I'm not a Yang guy, but he said we should really be measuring the economy by how healthy are people, how happy are people, right? But we don't do that. And so like we have these numbers going up that everyone's thinking, okay, so like it's working, I guess. But people inherently understand when there's unfairness in the system. And so I think the broader context of what's going on with, you know, the protests, the Black Lives Matter movement is, I understand intuitively that the system is unfair to me. And I think, you know, in some ways they're correct drawing the circle around the color of your skin. In some ways, I think it's much larger than that. But the idea that there are protests and violent actions being taken and all this kind of stuff is I think proof that the system's not working and it cannot continue like this. We are actually at a very dangerous teetering point where all of a sudden the system changes because so many people are recognizing it's unfair to them. And I think if you look at people my age, and this is like an interesting data statistic, people my age have some of the most favorable views of communism in all of America and in the world, really. I mean, people my age love communism. It's freaky. It's terrifying. And the reason is that they're brought up in a system where 1% of people own all the wealth, where their ability to interact with society, they have to go to college where they're going to be in debt for the rest of their lives. And every single house they want to buy is way hyperinflated because we can't allow houses to go down in price because everyone's retirement is somehow tied to their valuation of their house, right? Even though we have all this deflationary technology when it comes to building houses, that house prices should be going down. We tie our wealth to houses, therefore house prices have to go up. So my age is completely isolated out of being able to participate in the economy successfully. Except for a few outliers. So I see this as, this is the ramble cut short, but I see this as really the beginnings of the earthquake that shakes the foundations of our economy. And I think that it happens way quicker than 2 decades. I think it happens within the next maybe not 2020, maybe 2024 though. I think we see a foundational change in what American politics look like, and it's attacking the same problem from, in my opinion, the absolute wrong angle.
Wow, you're that's this decade here we're talking now. You're short term. Wow, you're a unique beast. I will say that right there. All right, dudes. Let's we got to, before we get our conclusionary thoughts in here, because we're getting toward the end of the show. Federico, your thoughts on Coinbase dealing with the governments, if any.
Well, I think it's not surprising at all. I mean, every time we deal with a trusted third party, we should assume that they are dealing with the government. So the fact that they are very open about it, at least at least their users know. So yeah, they are a company. They are maximizing their profit. I don't think they are necessarily doing a good move for the long term. I think other companies in the space will be more profitable in the long term. But yeah, it's just like you're dealing with third parties. Just assume that they take all your information and sell them to the worst people you can imagine, and that's it. So it's good. At least they being so open about it. They educate the public and the users about the risks of dealing with trusted third parties.
Wow, this is the world we live in today. You deal with a trusted third party, just assume they're selling your information to the worst possible people. Wow, what a land we're in. All right, let's. I don't want to put you on the spot or anything, Federico. Do you have any technical news you want to share about Bitcoin? Anything? Because you are a tech guy and everything. Anything interesting? Lightning Network? Anything you want to share?
Well, yeah, like recently there has been some update with the RGB project. So tokens on Bitcoin for those interested in this kind of stuff, in which Bitfinex is investing a lot. So I think they're going to show USDT on RGB, which is compatible with Lightning Network. I think within a few months. So there's something.
What's the name? What's the name of that again? I didn't catch what you said. It's called at first. RGB
tokens. That's the project for tokenization on Bitcoin, like Color Coin, basically. Okay. But they should work also on the Lightning Network. It will work also on the Lightning Network. And now, like some code has just been released, but it's some basic walleting functionality. So it's not really like user friendly yet, but people are building on it. So that's something like worth putting an eye on, because like soon we maybe see USDT and other tokens on Lightning Network for people interested in this kind of stuff.
All right. Anything else you want to share? Any Italy stuff? And it's the floor is yours. Anything that was left off?
Yeah, I think I said enough.
Okay, cool. Very cool. Thank you for being on, making your big return here. Now we'll go to John next. Conclusionary thoughts, any stories you wanted to add, what you're doing, talk about your podcast.
Not really. I mean, I appreciate you having me on. It's always fun to chat. I'm loving doing the pod, speaking with a lot of different people, and I guess my thing is that I find, regardless of what the price is, and regardless of what's happening out in the broader world, and in many cases it's very crazy. Like, my enthusiasm just seems to know no bounds for what's going on with Bitcoin. Like, I wake up every day and somehow it's increased. So, and I know there's a lot of people in the space that want to preserve their privacy and anonymity, and that's totally cool. I respect it and I understand why. But for those people that have decided to be public with it, like, I'm always just such a big advocate for expressing yourself in whatever capacity feels right. Whether you write, you do videos, you do podcasts, you make comic books, like, I don't know, like, just don't be afraid to talk about this stuff and to share this message. Bitcoin doesn't require it. It's going to assert its truth at some point anyways, but one, it kind of signals who you are and what you're about and draws people of a similar ilk to you. And I think it's just, it feels good. It feels really good to engage in something that you believe so strongly in, and that is such a force multiplier for good in your own life and in the world. So, let it rip.
All right. Pound that like button. All right, Brandon, hopefully your mic is good here and you can get some good conclusionary remarks in and plug what you're doing over there at Bitcoin Magazine, your show on Thursdays, anything you want to talk about.
Yeah. So I'll do a quick, find me at Bitcoin Magazine, follow Bitcoin Magazine. Drinks and Quarantine's a fun show we do that Adam was referring to. We had a great one last night with Nick Carter, Jeff Booth, Preston Pish, Melton Demers, and Brian Estes. It was an awesome conversation. Check it out. Closing thoughts is actually an interesting thread that I think we're about to hear a lot more about. Taproot. Everyone do some research on Taproot. Taproot is the next big technical improvement in Bitcoin. And there's going to be a lot of questions around how to implement it safely, how to get consensus around it, how to make sure that we have all the security holes plugged with it. It is the next SegWit conversation. So if you want to learn about what the devs are talking about, want to understand where this thing's going, check out Taproot, start formulating some opinions on it. It'll be the next big thing to talk about.
Wow, it's the next I'm writing this down. SegWit conversation. I like that line. I'm going to bring that up on my show on Sunday. All right, dudes. Thank you very much, guys. Remember, here you get in the BitcoinMeister ecosystem. You get a new show here every day. Follow me on Twitter at TechVault. The backup channel is on Saturday nights. That's where we do the Beyond Bitcoin show. All the other shows, all the other days of the week, we're here on the main channel. And it's conviction, people. Hey, goodbye, my elite friends. I didn't say hello, my elite friends, but I know all the elite friends are watching this right now. Pound that like button. And Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Spread the word. Have a great, safe weekend. Go out there, have fun, live your normal life. There is no new normal. Keep on doing your thing. Bitcoin is the next Bitcoin. Thanks a lot again. See you all later. Bye-bye.